I'm standing in the kitchen of my apartment, phone pressed to my ear, listening to my brother's voice crack as he tries to explain something he shouldn't have to explain at all. Sarah, I swear it wasn't intentional. Mom just. She reorganized the seating chart last minute and... I hang up. Not angry, not yet, just done. I look at the pale blue invitation sitting on my counter, the one with gold lettering that says, "Celebrating the union of David and Catherine," and I notice something I missed before. My name is spelled wrong. Not a typo, not a mistake. It says Sarah instead of Sarah. Everyone else's name is perfect. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, is a note. Limited space, intimate gathering only. I was never supposed to see that invitation in the first place. My neighbor slipped it under my door by accident, the one addressed to someone else in the building. When I opened it, I realized why. My mother had mailed one to a backup address, trying to keep me from knowing. They didn't want me there. But here's what they didn't know. I was about to become the most important person at that wedding. Not because I wanted to be, because I had to be. 6 months earlier, I was someone else. I was the kind of woman who picked up her brother's dry cleaning without being asked, who sent her mother flowers on random Thursdays, who believed that family meant something, that loyalty was automatic, that love had a permanence like bone. I worked as a financial auditor for Castellano and Associates, a mid-sized firm in the city. The work was methodical, precise, safe. I was good at finding what people tried to hide, discrepancies in accounts, fabricated receipts, money trails that didn't add up. Numbers never lied. People always did. My life was small, but it was mine. Apartment with a view of the park, Tuesday yoga, Sunday brunch with my best friend Marcus, a savings account that grew slower than I wanted but faster than most people managed. I was 32 years old, and I had made peace with the fact that I wasn't the kind of woman men fought over. I was the kind they felt comfortable with, safe, undemanding. My family understood this about me. They knew I would always be there, available, accommodating. David is 3 years younger, and he always got to be the golden child. Not because he was smarter or kinder. He wasn't. He was charming, charismatic, the kind of man who could convince you that his failures were actually your fault. Growing up, I watched my parents forgive him for things they punished me for before I even had a chance to explain. But I wasn't bitter about it. I thought I was above bitterness. I thought understanding the psychology of family dysfunction meant I was evolved beyond it. I was wrong about a lot of things. When David called me 3 months ago to tell me he was engaged to Catherine Winters, I was genuinely happy. Catherine worked in marketing at a luxury brand. She was beautiful in that effortless way that made other women like her immediately. She was nothing like the women David usually dated. I thought maybe he was finally growing up. "You'll be a bridesmaid, obviously," he'd said. "Maid of honor, actually. I already talked to Mom about it." I believed him. The first crack appeared in late August. I called David to discuss bridesmaid dress colors, and Catherine answered his phone. Not unusual. They lived together. But something in her tone when she said hello, a slight hesitation, like she wasn't sure she should answer his phone at all, made me pause. "Oh, hey, Sarah. David's in the shower. Can I help you with something?" "Just wanted to talk about the wedding, the color palette." "Oh, actually, I think my mother-in-law already has something specific in mind. She sent you an email about that, didn't she?" She hadn't. Not that I saw. When did she send it? 2 weeks ago, maybe longer. She's been coordinating everything pretty independently. David lets her because honestly, David's not super invested in wedding stuff, you know. I laughed, but it felt wrong. That doesn't sound like something David would do. He's usually pretty controlling. Catherine's pause was longer this time. "Is he? I guess you know better than me." The conversation ended shortly after. I told myself it meant nothing. My mother loved weddings. Of course she was getting involved. Of course she hadn't included me in every email. I probably hadn't checked my spam folder in weeks. That was the explanation. But I checked my email that night. There was nothing from my mother about bridesmaid dresses, nothing from Catherine, nothing from anyone. I searched for David's name in my inbox and found the original engagement announcement, sent from my mother's email address, addressed to family and close friends. I was listed, along with 12 other people. I wasn't close anymore. I was family. There was a difference. Then, 2 weeks later, I ran into my mother at the grocery store near her house. She was with Catherine. They were laughing about something, heads bent close together, and they didn't see me until I was already walking toward them. The look on my mother's face when she noticed me, surprise, maybe even guilt, told me everything. "Sarah, I didn't know you shopped here," my mother said, which was a lie. I'd been shopping there for 5 years. I was just grabbing a few things. "Hi, Catherine, how are the wedding plans going?" "Amazing," Catherine said, and she meant it. She genuinely lit up talking about it. "Your mom's been incredible. She's basically doing everything." I looked at my mother. That must be exhausting. "Not at all. I love having something to focus on." She was looking at me carefully now, like she was trying to read whether I'd figured something out. "You must be excited too. Are you going to bring a date?" The question was innocent, except it wasn't. It was an assumption wrapped in concern. Poor Sarah. Maybe she could find someone to bring along. "I haven't really thought about it yet," I said. "I'm still not entirely clear on what my role is supposed to be." "Maid of honor," Catherine said quickly. "David's told you that, right?" "He did, actually, though I haven't heard anything concrete from you or David about what that involves." My mother jumped in. "Well, you know how these things go. There will be duties closer to the date. Let me email you the full rundown." She didn't email me anything. What I found instead, 3 days later, was an Instagram post from Catherine. A photo of her dress fitting at an exclusive bridal salon downtown. The caption read, "So grateful for my mother-in-law's impeccable taste and my sister-in-law for being by my side through all of this." In the photo, Catherine was standing between a seamstress and my mother. The picture had been taken from the side, showing 3 women in the mirror. There was no fourth person. There were never supposed to be 4. I didn't comment. I didn't like the photo. I closed the app and sat very still in my office, looking at the numbers on my screen that suddenly seemed very small and insignificant. That night I texted David, something casual, just checking in. He didn't respond for 6 hours. September brought a new kind of pain. The kind that doesn't come all at once but compounds daily, each small incident building on the last until you're standing under a weight you didn't see being stacked. David finally called me back. He sounded tired. "Mom said you ran into her at the store. Look, if you're upset about not being in Catherine's fitting photos, I can explain." I hadn't mentioned Catherine's fitting photos. My mother had told him I was upset, which meant they'd discussed me. They'd probably laughed about my hurt feelings over wine, the way families do when they've decided someone is being unreasonable. "I'm not upset about photos," I said, which was technically true. "I'm upset about not being asked about my availability as maid of honor. I'm upset about emails I wasn't included on. I'm upset about my mother telling Catherine things about me that aren't true." "What things? What did Mom tell her?" I wanted to say it then, that I'm pathetic, that I'm desperate, that I'm the kind of woman who needs rescuing, but I didn't have proof of that. I only had feelings, and feelings weren't evidence. "Just be honest with me, David. Do you actually want me in this wedding?" The pause before he answered was damning. "Of course I do. You're my sister. Of course you're part of this." He was lying, and we both knew it. But he was doing it kindly, which was somehow worse than if he'd just told me the truth. Kindness was easier to doubt yourself against. "Okay," I said. "When's the engagement party?" "Next month, October 15th. Mom's throwing it at the country club. Black tie, around 80 people. You're going to love it." He was already mentally preparing me to be disappointing him by asking where I fit in. He was already practicing his sympathy for when I inevitably asked questions that made him uncomfortable. "I'll be there," I said. The engagement party invitation came a week later. It was cream-colored with black lettering, Very elegant. My name on the envelope, spelled correctly this time. A small mercy. Inside was a card with the date, time, location, and dress code. Below that, in my mother's handwriting, a note. So looking forward to celebrating with you. It felt like being invited to my own funeral. I noticed in the details that there would be assigned seating. That was fine. I'd sat at assigned tables before. I figured I'd be somewhere prominent, near David and Catherine, the way a family member should be. My mother sent an email the day before the party with a PDF attachment. "Seating chart do not share," it read. I opened it, expecting to see my name positioned strategically. I was at table 7, the last table, next to the kitchen entrance. Table 1 was for David and Catherine and their immediate friends. Table 2 was for my mother, my father, Catherine's parents, and the wedding planner. Tables 3 through 6 were for extended family and close friends. Table 7 was for miscellaneous guests. The kind you had to invite but didn't necessarily want talking to you all night. I was miscellaneous. I looked at the names at table 7 and realized I didn't recognize most of them. I pulled up the guest list and searched for my own name in the proximity to couple notes my mother had made. There was nothing next to my name. No notation. No explanation. But next to Catherine's friends, she'd written things like insider and close confidant and absolutely essential. Next to my name, nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed doing what I'd spent most of my life doing, trying to understand how I'd become invisible to the people I'd built my life around. And then something shifted. I stopped trying to understand. Understanding was for women who had hoped that things might change. I wasn't that woman anymore. I got out of bed at 3 a.m. and opened my laptop. I started making a list. Not of grievances, I'd done enough of that. A list of facts. Dates, times, interactions, the Instagram post, the email I wasn't sent, the dress fitting I wasn't told about, my mother's sudden close relationship with Catherine over the past 2 months, the way David's voice changed when I asked if he actually wanted me there. I added notes, details, theories. And then I did something I'd never done before. I started digging into things that weren't quite my business. My family's financial situation, for one. I had access to certain information through my job. Nothing I wasn't allowed to have access to, technically, but information that was generally kept private out of professional courtesy. I knew David had taken a mortgage out on a house last year. I knew he and Catherine had been shopping for an investment property. I knew my mother had taken out a personal loan 6 months ago, the amount substantial enough that I'd noticed it in passing during a routine report. I knew from casual conversations over the past 3 months that Catherine had recently received a significant inheritance from her grandmother. Enough to fund a wedding, enough to fund more than that. I didn't know why I was collecting this information. Not yet, but it felt important. The morning of the engagement party, I woke up clear-headed in a way I hadn't been in weeks. I took a shower. I did my makeup carefully. I put on the black dress I'd bought for the occasion, the one I'd let myself indulge in because I thought I was celebrating my brother. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. Not because of how I looked fine, professional, composed, but because of what was behind my eyes, the blankness, the absence of hope. I looked like a woman who'd already made a decision. Part 5, Silent Transformation, 2026 Min. The car ride to the country club took 30 minutes. I used that time to think. The anger was gone. That was the strange part. I'd expected rage. I'd expected to arrive seething, bitter, ready to make a scene or say something cutting. But there was nothing like that. There was only clarity. I understood now that this wasn't random. This wasn't circumstantial. This was systematic. My mother had orchestrated my removal from this wedding carefully. She'd included me just enough that I couldn't accuse her of excluding me, but excluded me enough that I would know exactly what she was doing. She was teaching me a lesson. The lesson being, you don't matter as much as you thought. And Catherine and David had let her, or maybe they'd done it with her. I wasn't sure yet, but I would be. The country club was beautiful in an understated, expensive way. The kind of place where every detail is perfect because that's what people like us expect. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, waiters in white gloves. The kind of place where suffering is done quietly, in the ladies' room, away from prying eyes. I checked my coat and moved into the ballroom. The room was already full. Long tables had been set up in careful arrangements, each one with centerpieces of white flowers and gold chargers. A stage at the front with a microphone. A small band setting up in the corner. My table was exactly where I thought it would be, next to the kitchen. A view of no one important. A place where you could watch the party but not quite be part of it. I sat down. The couple at my table, the Hendersons, if I was reading their name card correctly, looked at me with mild interest and then looked away. They were in their 60s, probably friends of my parents, probably drafted into attending as a favor. "First time at the club?" the woman asked. "No, I've been here before, just not in a while." She nodded and turned back to her husband. They didn't ask my relationship to the bride and groom. They didn't ask my name. I was furniture. I watched my family. My mother was in her element. She moved between tables like she'd choreographed every step. She touched people's arms. She laughed at jokes she'd probably heard before. She was performing for everyone, and everyone was watching. The mother of the groom, the woman who'd orchestrated this beautiful celebration, the woman with impeccable taste and control. David stood on stage with Catherine. They held hands. They looked happy. And maybe they were. Maybe in his mind this was all normal. Maybe he didn't think about the fact that his sister was sitting in a corner, invisible. Catherine's father approached the microphone and made a speech about his daughter. He talked about watching her grow up, about how proud he was, about how David was a lucky man. He cried a little at the end, and people applauded. My father sat at table 2, looking uncomfortable. He always looked uncomfortable at events like this. He was a quiet man, an engineer, someone who believed in systems and logic and the kind of truth that could be measured. He'd never understood my mother's need for drama and control. They'd been married for 35 years. After the dinner course was cleared, my mother took the microphone. "I want to say a few words about my son," she began, and I felt my stomach tighten. She talked about David as a child, about his accomplishments, about how proud she was. She talked about Catherine like she'd known her for decades, even though they'd met less than a year ago. She talked about the wedding, which would be next May, and how she was planning something truly magical. And then she said something that made me stop breathing. "I'm so grateful that this family gets to celebrate true love, real commitment, the kind of partnership that lasts because it's built on honesty and genuine connection. Not everyone is lucky enough to find that, but when you do, you hold on to it with everything you have." She was looking directly at me when she said it. The people at my table didn't notice, but I noticed, and my mother knew I noticed because she smiled. A smile that said, "I know you're watching. I know you understand what I'm saying about you." I smiled back. That was the moment. That was when my transformation was complete. I was no longer the woman who wanted to understand her family. I was the woman who was going to make them understand themselves. After the party, I spent 2 weeks doing very normal things. I went to work. I submitted reports. I had lunch with Marcus, my best friend, and didn't mention any of this. I went to yoga on Tuesday. I bought groceries on Friday. I was the picture of stability and routine. But in the margins of my normal life, I was building something else. First, I hired a lawyer. Not a flashy one. Not someone my family would recognize or hear about through the grapevine. I hired a woman named Patricia Chen who specialized in family law and civil disputes. I met her in her small office downtown on a Tuesday after work. And I told her everything. "I want to know what legal options I have," I said. "If someone in my family was gaslighting me, manipulating me, trying to damage my reputation, what recourse would I have?" Patricia listened without taking notes. She was a woman in her 60s, with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Emotional abuse within a family dynamic is difficult to prove legally, she said carefully. You would need evidence, documentation, witnesses, and honestly, most courts are reluctant to intervene in family matters unless there's financial gain involved or criminal behavior. What if there was financial gain involved? She leaned forward slightly. Then we'd have something to work with. Can you be specific? I told her about the inheritance, about Catherine's recent financial windfall, about the wedding, about the house and the investment property, about my mother's sudden involvement and influence. I think, I said slowly, that my family might be using Catherine's money, and I think my mother orchestrated my exclusion specifically to keep me from asking questions. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. That's a serious accusation. Do you have any evidence? Not yet, I admitted, but I can get it. She studied me carefully. I need to be clear about something. If you go down this road, there's no coming back. Families have a hard time recovering from legal action against each other. You need to be absolutely certain. I am, I said. And I was, because by that point, I'd realized something. My family had already decided there was no coming back. I was just the one making it official. I started attending to details. David's wedding had a wedding planner, a woman named Vivian who worked out of an office in the financial district. I happened to know that office building. I started eating lunch nearby. I learned Vivian's schedule. I learned that she had a coffee habit and went to the same cafe every Tuesday and Friday morning at 9 a.m. I also learned that she was friends with Catherine. They'd gone to college together. On a Friday morning, I sat at the cafe with a book I wasn't reading and watched Vivian laugh with a colleague. I watched her type on her phone. I watched her move through the world with the kind of confidence that came from being on the winning side of a situation. I didn't approach her. I didn't need to. I just needed to understand who she was and how much she knew. I also started paying attention to my mother's emails, which I had access to through a shared family cloud account I'd set up years ago for organization purposes. Technically, I had her permission to access it. She'd forgotten I had that permission. There were dozens of emails between my mother and Catherine, discussions about the wedding, discussions about David, discussions about family members, including me, in terms that made my skin crawl. In one email, my mother wrote, "Sarah has never been good in social situations. She takes things too seriously. I think Catherine might be intimidated by her, so I've been trying to keep them from getting too close, for everyone's sake." This was a lie. Catherine and I had barely interacted. I'd given them no reason to think I would do anything to intimidate anyone. In another email from Catherine, "Your plan is brilliant. David will never even notice the shift in his relationship with Sarah. He'll just think it's distance growing naturally." Plan, she'd used that word. They had a plan. I saved every single email. I downloaded them. I created a folder on an external hard drive. I made copies. I was building a timeline. Then I did something that felt dangerous and necessary. I hired a private investigator. His name was Marcus, not my friend Marcus, a different Marcus, and he came highly recommended by Patricia. He was expensive, but I had savings. I had a job. I had resources. "I want to know everything about these 3 people," I said, handing him a file with my mother's name, David's name, and Catherine's name. "Financial records, phone records if possible, any legal issues, any patterns of behavior, everything." He looked at me for a long moment. "This is going to get expensive and ugly, you sure?" "I'm sure," I said. 3 weeks later, Marcus came to my apartment with a folder. It was thicker than I expected. "Your instinct was right," he said, setting it on my coffee table, "but not in the way you probably thought." He opened the folder and showed me bank statements, detailed ones I couldn't have accessed on my own without someone in the financial world making a mistake or breaking a rule. Catherine's inheritance was not the $200,000 I'd estimated based on casual conversation. It was $3.2 million. Her great-grandmother had been wealthy in a way that was old money, hidden money, the kind of wealth that didn't announce itself. The inheritance had been transferred to a joint account, she shared with David 6 weeks after they met. "That's not typical," Marcus said, "but it's not illegal. Young couples in love put money in joint accounts all the time." "Except they met less than a year ago," I said. "I know, that's the interesting part." He walked me through the records. Catherine had been dating someone else when she met David, someone named Marcus Chen, who was, coincidentally, married to someone else at the time. The affair lasted 8 months. Then Catherine met David at a party, and suddenly she was completely out of the other relationship. 3 months later, she and David were engaged. "Your mother," Marcus continued, "knew Catherine before David did. They met at a charity event in March of last year. Within weeks, your mother was introducing Catherine to social circles. Specifically, circles that would introduce her to wealthy single men." "My mother was, what, playing matchmaker?" "Not exactly. Look at this." He showed me a series of financial transactions. My mother had made loans to my father that were then supposedly invested. Money that disappeared into accounts that didn't exist. Money that then reappeared in Catherine's family's accounts. "Your mother was moving money through Catherine's family," Marcus said. "I don't have proof of the exact nature of the arrangement, but my best guess is that your mother set up an introduction between Catherine and your brother, knowing that Catherine's family money would eventually become accessible to your family." "That's insane," I whispered. "That's also potentially fraud, depending on how the money was being used and whether Catherine's family knew about the arrangement." But there was more. David had taken a mortgage out on a house, using Catherine's inheritance as collateral, without Catherine's explicit knowledge or permission, according to the paperwork. His name was on the deed, but the financial obligation was hers. "If he defaults," Marcus said quietly, "she loses the house, not him, her." I felt something inside me shift, not anger, something colder. "Is that legal?" "Depends on the state. Could be fraud, could be financial abuse, could be a combination of things. But the point is, your mother saw an opportunity. She saw a young woman with money, figured out how to connect her to your brother, and then systematically isolated anyone who might ask questions. Like you." "Why me specifically?" "Because," Marcus said, "you work in finance. You understand money in a way most people don't. Your mother might have been worried you'd notice irregularities. So I'd been surgically removed, excluded, humiliated, not out of cruelty exactly, but out of necessity. I was a threat to a plan that predated the engagement party, a plan that had been in motion for over a year." "There's one more thing," Marcus said, pulling out a single piece of paper. It was a screenshot of an email, from my mother to Catherine, dated just 2 weeks before the engagement party. "David is starting to ask questions about the financial structure. I told him you prefer to keep separate finances and he believed me, but we need to move quickly. If Sarah finds out, she'll ruin everything. She's always been jealous of David, and I'm afraid she'll try to sabotage this. We need to secure the marriage before she can interfere. The sooner you marry him, the sooner the money is truly protected. Trust me, I've been managing my family for 35 years. I know how to handle Sarah." I read it 4 times. Jealous? She'd called me jealous of David. She'd told Catherine that I would sabotage the marriage. She'd positioned me as a threat to be neutralized. And they'd done it. They'd made me invisible. "Sarah," Marcus said, "I need to ask you directly. What are you going to do with this information?" I looked at him across my coffee table, surrounded by evidence of my family's betrayal, and I smiled. "I'm going to end this," I said. I waited until the wedding invitations went out. The actual wedding invitations, not the engagement party ones. The formal ones with my name spelled correctly, listing me as maid of honor. My mother had included me, finally, because excluding the maid of honor would have raised questions. She'd needed my role as a buffer, as a visual symbol of family harmony on the day when everything needed to look perfect. I attended a wedding dress fitting 3 weeks before the wedding. Catherine was radiant in white, and I stood behind her in the mirror, smiling, looking every bit like the devoted sister-in-law. In private, I prepared. I organized all my evidence, the emails, the financial records, The investigators' report. Everything Patricia Chen and I had built together. She reviewed it all carefully, testing every claim against what could be proven legally. The inheritance diversion is clear, Patricia said. The collateral issue is problematic but defensible. The financial fraud is where we have the strongest case. Your mother was moving money through channels that weren't transparent. Catherine's family may not have known about it. What about the emotional abuse? I asked. The gaslighting. That's harder to prove, but the pattern is documented. The emails help. Your record of events helps. If we go public, the court of public opinion might be more forgiving than an actual court. But I want to be clear. Once you do this, you cannot undo it. I already knew that. 2 days before the wedding, I called my mother. "Hi, honey," she said, her voice warm and maternal. "How are you feeling about tomorrow? I hope you're excited." "Actually, I wanted to talk to you in person. Can we meet?" She hesitated. Maybe she sensed something. "Of course, when?" "Right now, at the house, just us." I hung up before she could ask questions. The drive to my parents' house took 15 minutes. I'd grown up there, in a beautiful colonial on a tree-lined street. The same house my mother had decorated perfectly. The same house where I'd learned that I didn't matter as much as I thought I did. She was waiting on the porch, wrapped in a cardigan, looking like a woman about to comfort her troubled daughter. "What's wrong?" she asked as I walked toward her. "Nothing's wrong," I said. "Everything's finally right. Can we talk inside?" My father was at work. My mother followed me into the living room. I sat in the wingback chair. She sat on the sofa, her face registering confusion and then something else. Wariness. "I know," I said, "about the money." She didn't move, didn't deny it, her face just shut down. That was how I knew it was true. "I know about the inheritance. I know about the collateral on the house. I know about the plan. I know about all of it." My mother stood up. Her voice, when she spoke, was different, harder. "Sarah, I don't know what you're talking about, but you're wrong. I have emails. I have financial records. I have a private investigator's report. I have evidence of fraud, gaslighting, and manipulation. And tomorrow, I'm going to sit at the wedding, and I'm going to watch your son marry a woman who doesn't understand that her future is being systematically destroyed. And then I'm going to go to Patricia Chen's office, and we're going to file a lawsuit against you and David and Catherine." "You wouldn't dare." "I would, and I am." My mother's face went white, then red, then something in between. "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" she hissed. "You're going to destroy this family." "No," I said quietly. "You did that. I'm just making sure everyone knows it. Catherine's family will come after you. David will come after you. You won't survive this." "Maybe not, but neither will you." I stood up and walked toward the door. "Wait," my mother said. "Wait, we can fix this. We can make a deal. Catherine doesn't know about some of these arrangements. We could straighten everything out. You don't have to do this." I turned back to face her. "Yes, I do," I said. "Because the alternative is spending the rest of my life wondering why I wasn't enough, why I was disposable. And I'm done wondering. I'm done accepting excuses. I'm done being invisible." I left before she could respond. I attended the wedding. I wore the blue bridesmaid dress that matched my eyes. I stood next to Catherine while she walked down the aisle. I smiled. I clapped. I acted like my world hadn't just tilted on its axis. During the ceremony, I thought about my brother, about how he didn't even know what was happening, how he was about to marry a woman whose financial security was being stolen from her by his mother, how his ignorance wouldn't save him. At the reception, I sat at table 1, exactly where I was supposed to be. My mother didn't look at me. David kept sending nervous glances in my direction, which meant she'd told him something. The speeches happened. The dancing happened. The cake was cut. Everything proceeded according to plan, everyone's plan except mine. And then, right after the first dance, while everyone was distracted, I called a lawyer at Catherine's family's firm. The one who'd been helping me prepare. I gave him the signal. 20 minutes later, Catherine received a call. She stepped away from the reception. 10 minutes after that, her mother arrived. Not happy, angry. Then David got a call from a detective asking about financial fraud and collateral irregularities. The wedding dissolved into chaos. My mother tried to leave, but Patricia had arranged for her to be served with papers right there in the ballroom. My father looked destroyed. Catherine cried. David looked like he'd been hit by a car. I stood to the side, watching it all unfold, and I felt nothing. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just relief. The relief of finally being done with something that had been slowly poisoning me. Catherine's parents immediately hired lawyers. An investigation began. Turned out, Catherine's family had indeed been defrauded. My mother had been moving money through their accounts without proper authorization. It wasn't a huge amount, maybe $400,000 over 2 years, but it was enough. Enough for criminal charges. Enough for David's marriage to be dissolved before it really began, once Catherine understood what her new husband had known and allowed to happen. Enough for my mother to spend the next 3 years in legal proceedings that would destroy her reputation, her savings, and her perfect life. 2 months later, I'm sitting in a cafe near my office, the same cafe where I watched the wedding planner. The light is golden in the afternoon. The coffee is warm. I'm reading a book I'm actually interested in. My phone buzzes. It's a message from Patricia. The preliminary settlement has been reached. Catherine will receive full restitution from my family's assets. David is facing felony charges for financial fraud. My mother will serve time. My father is divorcing my mother. He called me last week and apologized for not seeing what was happening. I told him I forgave him, and I meant it. David sent me a letter from a therapist's office. He said he was finally understanding how he'd been manipulated by our mother his entire life. He said he was sorry. He said he understood if I couldn't forgive him. I haven't responded. I don't know if I will. Marcus, my best friend, asked me how I was feeling. I told him honest. Empty, maybe. Peaceful. I'd spent my entire life trying to understand why my family didn't value me, and it turned out the reason was simple. They didn't see me clearly. They saw a tool, a threat, an obstacle. They never saw me. Now they see me. Everyone sees me. I look out the cafe window at the people passing by, people with their own secrets, their own ways of being invisible, and I think about something Patricia said to me just before the wedding. Revenge isn't always loud, she told me. Sometimes the best revenge is being smarter than the people who hurt you, and you are so much smarter. She was right. I didn't need drama. I didn't need to scream or cry or make a scene. I needed evidence. I needed patience. I needed to be willing to wait until the moment when silence was louder than anything I could have said. I finish my coffee. I pay my check. I walk out into the afternoon light. For the first time in as long as I can remember, I'm not walking away from something. I'm walking toward something. Toward a life where I'm not waiting for my family to love me. Toward a life where my value doesn't depend on being visible to them. I'm exactly where I need to be. And everyone finally knows it.